Welcome to the Nexus Unloaded podcast. This is Will Crozier.
And I'm Zach Congonis. We are here to bring you the best solutions to your lifting problems. Through our real-world experience, we hope to break things down in a digestible, applicable, and entertaining way.
What do you say at the end of each of our episodes?
I say red hot.
You say red hot.
Red
There was
hot.
another one that I thought you said red hot.
Nah, it's normally red hot. I don't know why.
Where'd that come from?
Fuck if I know. I just started saying it. Just like I say howdy instead of hello. Like, I'm not a fucking cowboy. When I say howdy.
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 Ahoy. That's what Hamish and Andy say. Ahoy.
Ahoy. See, I think howdy howdy has some charm to it, has some flair. You give a little howdy.
You tilt your hat.
I wanted to kick this off because I've got two things. The first one, I mean, neither of them are important at all, to be honest. The first one is the dunk date. The dunked update? How do you say?
Yeah, when you're going to
Dunk
hit your
update.
360 backflip dunk.
The dunk date. We'll call it dunk date. We have established that a 2-foot takeoff is much more viable than a 1-foot takeoff. That is the lesson.
Okay.
The lesson that has been learnt this week. So if anyone out there wants to learn how to dunk, probably use 2 feet instead of 1. That's the wise words of wisdom.
To start with, what did you try the 1 foot and you just failed miserably? Like,
I just wasn't
fell on
getting
your
as much
face or
height.
something?
It's not as much height, not as much oomph.
Just more of a long jump.
Pretty much. We're having a hard time turning that horizontal velocity into vertical. You know, you got to fucking. For those who are just listening, I'm doing like hand movements to go along with that.
Dancing. You're
Yeah.
dancing.
It's more dancing. So
Yeah.
that's the dunk update. And the second thing is I've taught.
How far's that? How far's that before you move on?
Until we fucking dunk a basketball. I mean, we're 2 weeks in now.
I thought you had a dunk day.
You had the day.
Yeah, well, it's
What's the
eight
date?
weeks, so six weeks from
Okay.
now.
It's an 8-week peak. What does a peaking cycle look like for a dunk? Like,
Pretty much
what's
just
the advancements?
the advancements is we rent out half of the Eltham basketball court for $22 and we spend 60 minutes jumping at a hoop. That is the progression scheme. We do that once a week
Okay.
and then do some pliers in the gym. I mean, by all accounts, that's essentially what people have said to do. Just keep jumping at the hoop until you get closer to dunking the
Do
basketball.
you do like drills, like pogos and...
Yeah, we have
Yeah.
some drills in the beginning, some pogos, some different takeoffs, and some plyo stuffs on a separate day. But for the most part, the general progression scheme is just keep yeeting yourself up until you have the
Yeah.
coordination and the power to reach the hoop.
Is there a like a measurability? Like, is there something like, oh, I'm closer this week than last week, or is it just like
how much hand touches the hoop?
yeah,
Like
cool.
I'm working
Yeah.
currently of like the first to second finger digits. I need to get it to like mid forearm. So I'm a while off.
because the ball needs to clear it as well, not just.
Well, we
yeah.
established that we're not going to be able to hold the ball and do it.
Oh, fuck.
So
Oh,
what
yeah.
we're going to need is someone has to lob the ball up because it's so fucking hard to hold the ball.
Yeah, that's why
This
the
is why
basketballs have huge hands.
Well, I thought I had big
They can just
hands, but
palm
I
it.
have teeny tiny lady hands. Fucking trying to pick it up off the floor, and it's like a shitty claw machine of the time zone. So we're going to have to have.
Get onto your strongman friends.
Well, someone's going to have to
tacky that
lob
up.
the ball up. Then you essentially yeet, grab,
Yeah.
and thunk it.
So there's not only the skill of the at getting the height and the jump. There's the skill of like you're trusting in this person to lob it correctly.
Well, I didn't
And then-
realize how much of your arms you had to use. Like, you really got to fucking get a good swing
Swing
going.
'em.
So with
Yeah.
the fucking ball in your hand, you're just
Does
like,
it give you a... Does it give you an even more of an appreciation for basketballers?
no, not at all. Horrible sport.
I love how much effort you put into planning this. Just kind of like progression scheme. Just tried a bunch of times. Didn't realize that any of the kind of attributes that you need to tick off to get there even existed. So
I've
just
noticed that you're also shredding too, mate. I saw Dakota's little ab update of you.
Well,
that's part of it.
I realized
less weight.
Exactly. That was legitimately the entire thing. Like, if I weigh less, it's probably going to be easier to jump. So I've lost like 4 kilos.
If I cut half of my arm, if I cut one arm off, because I need at least one arm. If I cut one arm off, then it would give me a slight more.
Well, that's the goal. Then after the dunk, we're going to try get a sub 11:30 and I have to be lighter for that anyway. So
It's an 11:30. What?
like under 11 seconds, 11 point whatever fuck the 11 and a half seconds, 100-meter sprint.
Fuck me.
That's the goal. We're going to go from dunks to sprints, then back to powerlifting.
Logical progression.
That's it.
Yeah.
I
And then
thought you
go
were
in
meant to be
circles.
beating Remy.
I will. It'll come. once I can dunk on him, and then
You're gonna have all this athletic capacity that you're just essentially gonna
waste.
waste.
Pretty much.
Going
We're just
back
having
to
we're just
powerlifting.
having a good time. We're having a
That's
laugh.
all right.
And the second
Well, at
thing,
least you have some clear goals now.
yeah,
That's all I
fucking
can
dunk
say.
a basketball and
Kinda.
eat and skeet. That's it.
Yeah.
Big boy.
The clear goals change every week, but that's all right. Let's
Yeah.
keep going.
They're opaque goals. The second thing is I've taught Jack how to speak Greek.
What?
Excellent.
Dakota actually told me not to, but I highly doubt she's listened to
Jack, your
any...
dog?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you talked like Coach Jack. I'm like, how the fuck did you teach that guy to speak Greek?
He's
They
next.
just react to.
He's
I guess
next.
they just react to noises. Yeah. So it's just like
I
a
reckon.
noise.
Yeah, pretty much. Dakota said not to, but she's not going to listen to this, so I'm pretty confident in saying that he can fucking speak at least 6 Greek words.
Nobody better tell her. I swear to God.
Yeah,
Somebody-
I'll be. If anyone fucking tells her, I'll know it's from here. And we have like 6 listeners, and we know your IP addresses, so I'll fucking come for you.
We know
but
all.
yeah, so he can speak.
It's probably Craig.
Fuck you, fuck Craig. If you fucking say a word.
Yeah. But yeah. So what commands you got?
So he's got a left side, right side, heel, middle command.
What's heel?
Heel is Fterna.
Fterna.
Okay.
And what's middle?
Messis.
Yeah. Okay. It's not too. It's not too.
It's pretty
different.
similar.
I mean, like, I'd love to get K9 Steve on this podcast because
K9
he
Steve.
does. Yeah, K9 Steve. He's fucking cool, mate. He's.
Can we get K9 Steve on the podcast?
Yeah, he's from the Gold Coast. We'll get him on.
Fucking talk about, we can talk about dogs for an hour. That'd be fucking
Get
sick.
anyone.
He
mate.
has the
We can
coolest
get
dog
anyone.
in the world, Gooch. He's ex-Special Forces with titanium fucking canines, mate. Don't mess with him. He will fuck you up. K9 Steve, Instagram him, and you
K9
guys will be amazed. K9
Sounds like a
underscore
really
Steve, I
bad
believe.
porn star.
Don't
Oh,
say.
God.
K9
I'm
Steve.
gonna definitely don't say that to him. Otherwise,
No.
you'll be chased down.
You'll be chased down by Gooch. I'll get...
Absolutely.
But he
fuck your
speaks...
day.
He does German... He does... I'm pretty sure it's German commands.
Well, there's actually
That's
a reason behind
Special
it.
Forces.
There's a reason behind it, and if
More
you have,
clear and articulate.
and it won't get jumbled up in regular conversation. I realized that I had
Yeah.
too many commands for Jack, and there were like 4 different commands for the same thing. So I'm just
Yes.
consolidating
That's
the
will.
least.
No,
That's
stop
will.
it. Don't.
Oh, well, they're not really commands. It's just what I wanted to do.
No, stop it! Don't fuck, Arkin, come here, fuck, come on, buddy, come on.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
don't get it. Whereas
Exactly.
I'm very clear. I'm like, kiss, and they give me kisses. And they're like, shake, give me shake. No is stop doing what you're fucking doing, you dumbass.
Really?
Like,
I thought no would have been something different.
no, they get no. No.
Angry no.
Angry no.
Tone of no.
They understand no. Bed. They know that. Good.
Well, we'll save the dog chat for
I
Steve.
wonder if Will's
Yeah.
trained as well as Arkin is. You get home.
Will knows.
Will, bet.
I'm trained as well as Tank, aka
Yes.
not at
Will,
all.
toilet. You want to go toilet? You go toilet?
I'll go pee pee,
You're like,
Willie. Yeah, the
Always.
They know toilet because then I take them outside and be like, go toilet, and he does it.
All right. Enough dog talk. Fucking hell, we're gonna just lost half the audience just there. We
All
are, yeah. But Craig. So Craig's actually written in a question, and has given us. If Zach wants to read it, I think you got it ready.
Yeah, I
Zach?
got it here.
So he's actually written a real question.
I
It's
got it
not
here.
just criticism this time.
Oh shit.
Recompose yourself.
Hit us
sorry.
with it. I've also got it just so I can. follow
I'll read
along.
it verbatim so everyone can get a grasp of Craig as a person. So, as a question, open bracket. Being honest, it's about me. Lol. Close bracket. How do you guys change your approaches in coaching and programming of someone of my age, 50 plus? Jack, please stop barking. This is that is lifting what I feel is big weights compared to say someone in their 20s, 30s, or 40s. Please help.
There was no please help, but okay. With Jack.
Yeah.
So good question. I love that he's giving himself a bit of ups there and going like, what I feel are big weights compared to other people. I love that he's throwing a little self-compliment.
People have to know that is the way Craig approaches life.
Yeah. No, he's doing pretty well, Craig.
He's doing very
hitting
well.
some good numbers, competing at one of the few people we have competing at Pro Raw, the Old Dogs division, the 50-plus division, which is a new division in Pro Raw coming up. So I'm actually looking forward to that. I think it's going to be really, really cool.
It's nice they've added it. I think that there's a lot of people there
I think
who will put on quite a
Yeah.
good show.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's I think 50 was the right spot for it as well. Because
Partials.
yeah, there are some people there that haven't got a chance to compete in Pro Roll before, but are absolutely guns for sure. So like there's a bunch of people I'm looking forward to in that division. I think it was a really good addition to the competition. But yeah, this is a good question because 50 plus, there are a few more things happening. Before that, like if we go on like a timeline, I feel like a lot of people are on this thing of like, as a teenager, you're just kind of screwing about, just doing whatever, having fun, doing sports, whatever it is you do. In your 20s, it's a little bit different today than for me, but in your 20s is when a lot of people get into the gym and start training, whether it's for whatever goal. But you can kind of get away with a lot at that point. You're your beginner stages, so literally you just kind of jump on a machine and do a few sets, and you'll make some sort of progress. You're a lot less injury prone at that point. Remember doing some of the stupidest shit ever when I was 20, just maxing out my squat literally week by week, and then having a terrible recovery protocol, as in like going out and getting on the drinks on the weekend and things like that, and still doing fine, still making progress. Something that I absolutely cannot do today.
Technically, and I honestly don't know if there's research to back this up, but one uni lecturer told me that 2 beers with friends are anabolic. More than 2, you fuck. But 2 beers with friends, apparently the social interaction offsets the negatives of the alcohol. This lecturer was, honestly, I think a small breeze would have killed him.
Doing this?
He didn't say. So I can assume every night.
When people say stuff like this, it's just like to try and validate their whatever habits they have.
I know we had this when we were talking about the recovery seminar that you did with Dean many years ago.
Yeah, it's a stress management thing.
It's a stress management
thing. I
thing.
get it. But
Once
I
a week.
like to say outright that 2 beers are anabolic is just, come on, bro. But yeah, and then when you get into your 30s, you have to start really, that's where the whole like training smart and the hard thing comes, that saying starts to maybe make sense to some people. I still feel like that kind of saying is a little bit off in that you still need to train really hard and smart, just purely because life is a lot more complex at that point. You have more responsibilities and a lot more shit going on usually, so you have to juggle a lot more things. In your 40s, hopefully you come up with a smart approach. You've learnt what works for you. Your joints are probably copping it a little bit if you've been lifting for 20 years or whatever at that point. And again, things are a little bit harder to manage. Things like patience and just learning to play a little bit on the safe side are going to favour you greatly at that point. And then 50 plus is, there are certainly a lot more going on at that point. We're talking about some negative things from the point of like hormonal stuff going on. Again, life stuff is going on.
You go through second puberty. Really have to hit the be very, very patient, very slow in your progressions, very, very conscious of what's going on, very smart with everything, because your recoverability is just not near as maybe where it was. I mean, I think it's a fair statement to say that as age increases, ability to recover from stimulus decreases. And it's not necessarily an exponential curve. You don't hit 50 and start to wither away towards death. But it's more so you just slowly lose that ability to be as robust as you were when you were younger. And that's a very common thing that people experience. And I know that you get to a certain point and the aim of the game is to decrease the rate of decay, not necessarily get any better. And that's certainly not 50. I think, where would you say that point of like, okay, things are going downhill.
I don't think
now.
it's something you can say the exact thing because like everybody's life is so much different, and that's where we're going to end up really going with this conversation. Is it's not just about the number at all. It's like from a coaching point of view, like recoverability and like stimulus to fatigue or whatever, like all the different ways of saying that we're talking about all the time. We've talked about in previous episodes of this. We've talked about a lot in the coaching process when it comes to giving somebody the right program for them. And not once have we mentioned age in that, but it's just another factor that contributes to that whole calculation, that whole process of tinkering and finding what works for you. It's not that I go like, it's not like I'm on a consult call with somebody and they're telling me about their goals and about where they are. And I go like, I see down here that you're actually 51. Well, just so you know, you're past the threshold of 50, so that means that we're going to have to drastically modify your program based off that alone. You know what I mean? It's not like
you have a geriatric folder sitting in Google Drive, and as soon as someone crosses the age bracket, you slide across the old man program and slot it in.
Yeah. There's just more. It's just more recovery factors. It's just like if you're training, you're going to be adding a stimulus, a stress to the body that you're hopefully going to adapt to. That's the aim of the game. And then your age, your gender, your lifestyle, so like your stresses, your nutrition, your sleep, all these different recoverability factors that we've talked about in previous episodes are going to govern the result that comes of that stimulus and if you can recover from it. And then it's our job as coaches to kind of mess with things, tinker with things, and head the plan closer and closer to what's optimal for a particular individual. Right? Like we can't go, you're 50, so we have to half the sets you're doing. It's just kind of like that 50-year-old might have all their shit together and have their nutrition nailed, their all those other recovery factors nailed, and then somebody 10 years younger might have all those factors not good and, not have good nutrition and have terrible sleep and be doing lots of things that make them recover worse. And, so the program... the 50-year-old in that circumstance might be able to handle more workload.
There's definitely some sick cunt 50-year-old out there who could just run circles around a regular 20-year-old who trains and then does drugs on the weekend. Like generally,
you just get away with a lot more.
Yeah,
at 20.
Generally speaking, the factors that are in your control are always going to be more important than the ones that aren't in your control. Like just because, as Will said, those individual factors play the biggest role. If you're 50 and you're sleeping like a brick, you're getting your food in, you're training well, you're being responsible for the things that you're doing, doesn't mean the progression has to stop. And I think for a lot of people, focusing on that factor that they can't really control, like the amount of people who will come and say, hey, look, I'm of a certain age now that I'm fragile and I can't do the same things I wanted to do. It's like, well, you probably can still do them, but it might just take a little bit more effort, or you might just have, as you said, a little bit less leeway to the things that you can control.
Yeah, you have to be a lot more on point with things. You can't just go like, you know what, I'm just going to run like if somebody comes to me and like we say, if we're trying to find, quote unquote optimal, the right training dose for a person and they are 50 plus, I'm probably going to play on the safe side a lot. I'm probably going to start with my RPEs, my proximity to failure a bit further away. I'm probably going to start with loads that are a little bit lighter. I'm going to start with volume that's a little bit more on the low side. I'm going to choose exercises that are a little bit more forgiving. You know what I mean? Like I'm going to kind of skew everything in their favor to allow them to recover, and then tinker from there. That's kind of where I'm going to start.
Erring towards the side of caution.
Very much so. Yeah. Whereas, 18-year-old kid comes up to me who's hitting all his stuff and going really well, I'm just going to be like, all right, like we can risk this a little bit more. I'm not saying that we're just going to absolutely just, here's German volume training as on top of Chico or something. It's just, but we're going to be a little bit more pushing them towards potentially, higher volumes and higher intensities and things like that that might be a touch more risky. But like I said, when I was, I don't know your experience with this, maybe you can tell us, but when I was 20, I literally ran the most fucking stupid program you've ever heard of. Just it's obscene volume, obscene intensities, as well as pretty much throwing in max squats or deadlifts on top of it nearly every single week, just because I wanted to see where I was and see if I was getting stronger, right? And then, like I said, my recovery factors, although I had my own nutrition and stuff on point, I was still going out and getting drinking and stuff like that. So being social, which certainly wouldn't have helped recovery, but I was still fine. I don't think I made much progress on those maxes. So I'm not saying it was it worked, but I still got ahead generally. Whereas if I tried to do that now, whew, you know what I mean? Whew,
you should do a throwback. You should dust off the old programs and do a month.
I might. Yeah, I might post up a picture of those old programs. I could dig them up in my email somewhere, but even just one day, I think would ruin me for a week of what we used to do. It just wasn't necessary. It just was absolutely not necessary. But we just erred way more on the, more is better. And if this is getting a good result, then more will surely get a better result, right? Whereas as we've talked about on this previously, it just absolutely is not that whatsoever.
Yeah.
Do you have any kind of like stories about that from?
Well, I mean, for one, Jack has joined us, so people actually watching the video can see his butthole that's just about to engross the screen. There he goes.
Excellent.
I guess for me, the biggest thing that I would love to do was I did a whole session that was just dumbbells, and every exercise you'd just run the rack. So you'd run the rack on every single exercise with as many dumbbells as you can. And if you don't know what running the rack is, you start at the lightest possible dumbbell, and you just keep going till you can't actively finish the exercise with the load. So I think the first exercise was like flat dumbbell press. Then it was like bent over bar.
I thought it was the other way. I thought it was like hit your heaviest weight, and then it's essentially like a 10 times drop set. Like
well,
just do
you could do it that way, and I'd probably say that way would probably be a little bit wiser than the other way, because you'd have a number where you start, like you have a starting point, not just we'll start at 5 kilos.
You're just fatigued by the time you get to your actual like stimulating weights. So you're just completely holding yourself back.
You've completely fucked it. But I think for the most part, when you're looking at those bits and pieces, God, I couldn't do it. I'm 24 and I feel like a fucking old man. I couldn't do that now. And that's saying a lot.
You could stop being a pussy. There's also a differentiation in goals between different age groups as well. Like we said, like these like Craig in particular, like hitting the like we mentioned the Pro Raw coming up, which I think is fantastic. So they still have like competitive goals, but like goals change a lot for these people at these ages. So often programming looks a little bit different for them, like health factors, making sure we're addressing blood work and all that stuff, or at least we're getting more regular blood work, more regular health checks, making sure cardio is taken care of, and that the body is as good as it can be at that age. To err on the side of caution, like we said, is a big importance thing. Whereas if you try and get a teenager to go and get a blood test to check their cholesterol, they're probably like, "Oh fuck, come on, man! I'm pretty much Superman. I'm invincible."
What? There's blood inside me? I thought it was just piss and vinegar.
It's just, we all think we're invincible, but it's slightly different, So we're gonna often, even though it's not the kind of theme of what Craig asked, that's going to influence our programming massively. It's just like the different goals,
and that comes down to just the same thing again. It's everyone has different goals. It's another point of you just programming towards the individual. Just because you are getting that little bit older doesn't mean the goal has to change drastically. Possibly the expectations of the goal may have to change. Like chances are that if you're 65, you're probably not going to be a world champion in the Opens unless you're just a qualified unit.
Mm-hmm.
But you can still push to be as strong as you can at that specific time. Possibly the time for hitting all-time PBs may be gone, but if you just started training at 40, then you still have plenty of good training years ahead of you. So again, it just comes down to the fact that everyone's an individual, and that's kind of, I think, the tagline that we'll kind of keep revolving back to for every point that we have.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then you kind of mentioned there, like the goals and the expectations. Like, so I think progression is a natural way to go with this conversation, because obviously, as you do age and as you get older, these training adaptations are going to slow. And like you said, at some point it's decay. It's just stopping you going backwards. But before that, it's going to be kind of incrementally slower and slower and harder to get gains. And that's not only from age, that's also because of training advancement. Like you've been training for 20 years, so it's not, learning how to squat isn't going to bring you big gains at that point.
Yeah.
If you've already been doing it for 20 years, you know what I mean? It's just like your training age, your advancement as an athlete and all that stuff at that point is likely a lot higher. So that combined with the biology side is going to lead to things being a little bit slower. And that's where I like...
Hopefully your training age, if you're getting into 50, hopefully your training age is quite high as well. Like that's the hope. Someone's been training for an extended period.
That's why I'm picturing, yeah. But then that's why I think auto-regulation at that point is really important. Because if I just say, hey guy, like here's a program and like each week we're just going to add 2.5% to last week's load, and we're just going to do that incrementally and just have nice linear progression and stuff like that. if I take that same approach to a 20-year-old and a 50-year-old, let's assume they have all their shit sorted on the outside, and they it's their progression rate is going to look like a lot different, and so that's where like we lean into auto regulation and using RPE or RIR or whatever tool it is to allow the individual to adjust to adapt to the training at the rate that they can be. Allow them to set the rate of progression and through just what the body allows them to, rather than trying to force progression that's a little bit too fast for somebody, or leaving gains on the table by progressing them a little bit too slowly. So I think at that age, it's a really powerful tool to be able to be self-reflective on intensity, but in other aspects of training as well, and auto-regulate around the board.
Because I guess one thing that does tangibly increase as the age does go up is injury risk. Not even just the fact that chances are, okay, the bits and pieces probably aren't what they used to be. There's probably a bit of rust in the engine. But also, if you do fuck something up, the chances of that tissue coming back and fully recovering takes quite a lot longer. Just because the way that I like to picture it, if you got 2 lemons, you got one plump, youthful lemon, then one relatively crusty lemon, there's less juice in the crusty lemon. And if you start squeezing some of that juice out, that's it. Like if you squeeze the lemon, there's no more juice. That's, say, a 60-year-old rupturing both quad tendons. That lemon's not doing much. Like
no crawdad analogy. I'm very disappointed.
I'll give you a second to come up with a crawdad analogy, but whilst I add another layer to this and just say that, like, also at that point, there's more likely a bigger list of previous injury history. Like there's probably a good list of 10 or so more things that have gone on. Like I've had some people come on in this kind of bracket and go, I'm like, so what's your injury history? It's usually they
get out like the index card flip book. Like, do we start at A?
No, well, like the thing is, like you just don't remember. Like they'll be like, no, I think I'm good. Like, yeah, my knee gives me a little bit of shit every now and then, but for the most part, I'm good. And then like 2 weeks into training or whatever, they're like, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, but like I fucking had my hip replaced, and then like I had my back, and they're just that's how I know.
Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just
no, I just
comes with
no.
life experience.
Yeah. I'm just saying that like it's funny. Like it's almost like you get to a point where like you just don't even remember like all the injuries you've had.
I've actually, if we take a slight sidestep there, I've got a story about my dad that's it's awful, but it's beautiful. So I got him into the gym a little while ago, and he's saying like, oh, they made bicep curls really hurt my arm. And I'm like, that's kind of a weird thing. So I look at his arm, and the long head of his bicep is like up here. Like at some point he has ruptured his bicep and
don't need it.
Didn't say anything. It's like fucking, it's in the wrong spot. And I'm like, how long's it been like that for? And he's like, I don't know. And I'm like, what? Like the long hair's just not there. It's just fucking receded up.
My dad tore his bicep. We have in my family home where I grew up in Cairns is a massive big tree house. And with that tree house, there's like, palm fronds and stuff like that fall around the front of the house, mosquitoes, that sort of thing. So Dad usually comes by every 6 months or so and throws all the palm fronds further down into the rainforest. And he tore his bicep throwing this big palm frond down further into the bushes as well. And he's like, heard this big pop, and he's like, oh, feels a bit funny. Like 2 weeks later, Will's down in Melbourne. He's like, yeah, you've torn your bicep, mate. Yes. Like,
is that really what he said? Oh, that feels funny. I could have imagined it been like, oh,
yeah, he
fuck.
just heard a pop. No, he just said he heard a pop, and he's just like, oh, that feels a little bit funny, and like couldn't really move his arm that well, and that was basically he kept going, like he kept doing.
Well, if you've never torn anything,
you wouldn't
know what that sensation
But he's
is.
also riddled with injuries from his motocross background as well. So he's just broken everything you could imagine. Just stubborn.
Yeah, but
we didn't really have a point there, but there's 2 good stories.
Yeah, but there will be a list, and so there will be like injury, a much bigger injury history that we're going to have to take into consideration when we get these people coming on. And like I said, that's why I'm going to err on the safe side, because usually there's little things missing from the list.
Physically, actually, physical things missing.
Yeah, and like you said, the injury risk in general is a little bit higher.
And sometimes that can just constrain the options that you have to train and program them with. Like certain exercises just might not feel great. Just like some people, I mean, chances are most people over 50, they have a stodgy shoulder or a stodgy hip. As you said, they have that list there. It might just mean that, hey, you're bringing in low bar 3 weeks out instead of 6 weeks out. And if the person's not competitive, maybe you just fuck off low bar in general. Like there's certain things that you have to work around based off that longer list.
Your training options is
dwindles,
diminished greatly. And it's just what it is. And this is where, like, if you're not experienced with this sort of people as a coach, it can get quite dicey because you just come in and do what you do with other people, and then you all of a sudden, like, everything's just playing up. So yeah.
Well, it's like in the mentorship this morning when you said generally when people are first starting, they just give what their coach said to them and then just hand it out to the next person down the line. In instances like that approach will not work. If you're, say, a budding 20-year-old strength coach and your coach has just given you the 6 days a week, 17 bench exposures a week and 52 squats, you can't really just pass that on to old Jerome Buddington of 50 years old who works in the steel mill. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know where Jerome Buddington came from.
But I get that. Yeah, it's for that person, for the upcoming strength coaches who are maybe getting these people come on board. My biggest advice is just talk to them, listen to them, really.
It's the advice for everyone, every client. Please talk to your clients and ask them what they need.
But really important, and just go like, what is it that you can do and can't do, and all that. Just like really be comprehensive with your onboarding there, and really trying to understand where the person's at, what they can get away with, because those people know your body at that point. You know what you can and can't do,
and sometimes it's even challenging some of those preconceived things. Like I've had a couple of people in the gym who I've done once-off consults with just to see how they move, and their response is generally, I can't squat, I've got a bad hip, or I can't do this or that. And sometimes it's actually about challenging, like, okay, this isn't age-dependent, you just don't move well. It has nothing to do with the fact that you're 50, you just move like a trash panda.
Yeah, well, those sort of things, I often find in that scenario it's more of a case of if somebody else has told them that, or like they've gone to another coach who maybe isn't really overly experienced with this, and then they have given them like, here's heaps of squats to do, and they are not even close to ready for like a low bar squat, and then they're like, I
can't do this.
This hurts a lot, like, and it's just, this is terrible, and then they get this bad idea of like, this exercise really fucks me up, where in reality it's kind of like you probably came into it way too hard, way too fast with the wrong approach, didn't ease into it, didn't take all the factors in, and didn't, like I said earlier, like you weren't patient with things, you weren't a little bit more playing on the safe side to start with, and ramping into it slowly, and that was more likely the big issue here, as opposed to just the blanket statement of this exercise sucks.
And I mean, you stole this quote from, who'd you steal this quote from? Age rewards the conscious and patient. Who'd we take that from?
I'm not sure. I don't know.
Somebody in the industry, we stole your quote. It is now ours. But it's true. Age rewards the conscious and patient. At the end of the day, you're going to have to make some slightly more conservative decisions, possibly not working up to 1 rep maxes as often as someone younger than you could, using different things to gauge your progression, using different metrics to track to make sure things are moving smoothly. Because, I mean, when it comes down to it, there's ways to tell you've gotten stronger without exposing yourself to a 1RM. Because 1RMs for anyone, like a true 1RM, isn't the best thing to do frequently. Like if it's a proper 1RM, I was always of the belief, and I'm not sure who told me this, but you only have a certain amount of proper 1 rep maxes. Ed Cohen, yeah. You only have a certain amount of them. Like God knows what that number actually is. I think if you lift like shit, there's probably less of them than if you lift really well. But there's a number. There's a certain number, and you don't really want to be pushing that number to the nth degree when you're a crusty lemon. And not to say that 50-year-olds are crusty lemons, but I'm just digging myself a bad hole there. Craig is going to love that one. I'm going to change his name on Facebook to Crusty Lemon. I might do that right now, actually.
So if do you want to give us a bit of a an overview to everything that we've said then, like to wrap this up, because I feel like we've covered the most part on this.
Yeah.
And it really starts at there's no 50-year-old folder on my program, spreadsheet. It's an individual, like looking at somebody's recovery and injury history and all the other things that I look at. For everybody, it's just another factor that comes into the decision making.
Yeah, the one sentence is coach the individual. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the sentence. Regardless of age, gender, height, skill level, you coach to the individual. If you do that, you can coach a 50-year-old. If you do that, you can coach a 90-year-old. As long as communication's open, as long as you know and they know pretty clearly what their limitations are, and you program within that, you're probably going to be fine.
Yeah.
And generally, they're really fun to talk to. Like, usually they have some pretty fucking funny stories. Like, I love spending time in the gym with, like, the older population, because, fuck, they have some funny shit to say.
They understand. Yeah, they're realistic. I like it. Yeah, so recoverability a bit lower in general. Injury risk probably going to be a little bit higher with the injury list coming into it a little bit longer. Having to play on the safe side a little bit more. Have a lower starting point with training variables, intensity, volume, slower increases and progressions, most likely. Just playing on the safe side with those week-to-week changes as well. Auto-regulation being a really, really good tool to allow them to, if they're pretty self-aware as an athlete, they should be at that point. And just generally, like a little bit more warm-ups, a little bit more cool-downs, a little bit more cardio, a little bit more attention to health certainly doesn't go astray. When it comes to comp prep, nothing else was really needed. You just probably need a little bit longer of a ramp. Like, rather than just throwing in like, hey, I'm going to do a comp in 6 weeks. Definitely a lot more prior planning is what I would suggest to those 50-year-olds out there who want to succeed in powerlifting. Is just like, give us more notice, give us a chance to ramp up things and get there, because you'll be stronger for it. You'll have less of an injury risk for it, and that kind of goes for everybody, but just especially in that bracket. It's just that timeline, having a longer timeline becomes more important. Cool. Happy with that?
I'm happy there.
All right.
Red hot.
That's a short and sweet one.
That's what I was waiting for.
Thank you for listening to Nexus Unloaded. Be sure to jump on our website to find details on everything mentioned on today's podcast, plus information on our coaching, mentoring, and gym services. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at NexusPerformance.Aus for any updates on what we are currently doing. See you all in the next episode.